Hi, it is 5:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The date is May the 25th of 2023, and this is the 37th episode of Effluvium and the penultimate stream for the season. I'm often fascinated by the origins of a perfumer. How does somebody become a perfumer, and where did that all begin? What inspired them? What started them on that path? And each person has their own unique story to that. The two guests that we have for this stream started in very different places. One started in the world of organic chemistry, and the other started in the world of farming and animal husbandry, which I find fascinating as well. So I'm delighted to have both of them as guests. They're going to be sharing with us their journey into perfumery, and we'll have lots of great questions from them as well. And we're going to start off things not with 3 first impressions, but with actually a little bit of show and tell. So we'll get started with that. I found this. Evening in Paris from Bourjois. This is a bottle that I presume to be from the 60s. And this has a very fascinating history to it. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So this was actually an Ernest Beau creation. This was launched in 1928. And it is really characteristic of fragrances at the time in the 1920s, with these stone fruits and violet, iris, heliotrope, rose, spring florals, and a base of amber, sandalwood, musk, and vanilla. So think of contemporaries like Le Bleu and the sorts. But this one has an interesting story to it because it became the every woman's fragrance. This was a fragrance that was accessible to those in the working class and the middle class. In fact, this is something that could have been purchased at a Woolworths here in the United States for a very affordable price. In the 60s, you could purchase something like this for 50 cents. It's a beautiful bottle. It had always been presented in a cobalt blue bottle. Mine's a unique one. It doesn't have the pointed cap, but rather has this very cool bakelite that has this sort of model to it. Mottled. So what's interesting about this one is, even though it was boasted as the fragrance more women wear than any other in the world in the 50s, by 1969, this actually was discontinued. And it wasn't until the 1990s where there was a resurrection of Evening in Paris. And the two perfumers behind that were François Demachy and Jacques Poge. So this was under actually Chanel, the Bourjois reissue, which I actually did smell it once at, of all places, the Vermont Country Store in Vermont, which happens to carry the relaunch of it. This was a very cool find in an antique shop, and it still smells quite lovely, in spite of the fact that it may be nearly 60 years old. What's really cool about this is they also had it was sort of like a precursor to, say, like Avon, because if you recall Avon, they would release their fragrances in a myriad of different novelty bottles. So that was the case even for Evening in Paris. Some were in the shape of stars, sailor hats, crescent moons, Christmas versions, Mother's Day versions, Easter versions, grandfather clocks, which kind of reminds me of Avon, hotel doors, shoes. But it was a fixture in a lot of women's homes by the 50s. especially those who may have not have been able to afford the more higher end offerings that, say, would be available at Nordstrom or Neiman Marcus, or think of all the other high end stores that are no longer in existence, like I Magnin or Bonwit Teller and all that sort of stuff in the U.S. But this is a great reference. It's great to have this addition to my collection, and it smells beautiful. So I just wanted to do a little show and tell for that. Soir de Paris, Evening in Paris by Bourgeois. Next, what I would like to do is bring in my co-host, Rachel, who is waiting in the wings. First, I'm going to very briefly check in with the chat here. It looks like the chat is a bit sparse, but that's fine. It means I can catch up to it a lot faster. Hey, Manginosis, great to have you tuned in. And hi, Alex. It was good seeing you this morning with Pep and Rafi. Hi, Mr. Clean. Thank you very much, my friend. And hey there, GMG. We currently have 16 people that are tuned in at the moment. And at about 5:15 p.m., so we're looking about 7 or 8 minutes, we're going to bring in our 2 guest panelists as well. Do you see that Roberto is waiting in the so-called green room in the backstage? And I'm excited to have him join in the conversation. Lovely. M3 Carlino, great to see you. Hey there, haven't seen you in a while, my friend. Good to see you, Fragrance Night Fight. Fight Night. Amanda Beadle, hello. Of the Bidot brand, which I'd be very curious to try. And hi there, DDLD. And Pat Lester and VJR. Great to see you. And I'm excited for you and anticipate the arrival of your sample pack and grab bag, which was sent out today and should reach you soon. I hope you do enjoy the various extra bottles that I had in my collection. And hey there, Mr. Smelly. Good to see you. All right, let's get this started. Okay, Alex. Alex has a Farmacia SS Annunziata Isos. I don't know about that one. I know about the house, and I know the house discontinued a bunch of these fragrances and then launched entirely different ones or something. There was a whole restructuring of the brand. Yes, I'm yaying for you as well. I'm so excited for you. All right, let's bring in Rachel. Hey. Oh, I don't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Hey, it's so great to see you. And
it's great to see you too.
It's always a pleasure, and I'm so excited for this show. Our guests are spectacular. And if you don't mind, I'm so sorry. I might pop off just for a second to help Diane with the link. And then if it's okay, I'll just come right back on.
Yeah, of course. Just let me know when you need to drop out for a second. Yeah. So what's new in your world?
Well, let's see. I just got an amazing Arige Ladore perfume that's actually waiting for me at home to open and to smell for the first time. I'm really excited. His Indonesia History of Attar. So, and I'll send you. Next time we swap, I'll send you a sample, because I'm sure I'm guessing that you're a fan of Russian Atom and might like to take a sniff.
I would love to. Next I have to send you. We have to go back and forth. So I know that you have one in transit, and then I have to put together something for you. And I'm pretty excited to curate what I'm going to send to you. But that would be very cool. Awesome. And the summer is approaching. I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break, as some folks are aware. So we have, what do we have coming up? We have the season finale next Tuesday. And that's going to be, usually I keep the panel to about 3 to 4 people, but we're going to make an exception for the finale. And there's going to be some people who are going to be coming in and out. So there are going to be some people who joined earlier in the stream, and then some folks who joined later, and so forth. So we'll probably have about 6 or 7 people throughout the evening, and that should be a fun time. And then next Thursday, I'm going to do a first impression stream. I do those periodically, and it's for a house called Scent Spells. Are you familiar?
I've never heard of this house, so I can't wait to tune in and watch, because I'm not familiar at all. And I love, it's funny, I don't know if your audience members know or not, but when I first started getting into perfume, JJ and your Instagram account was one of my first kind of touchstones. There was Soft Fleur Bun, there was, there were other touch tones, of course, but JJ, you were one of the first, because you do this really cool thing where you'll have like a material or a focus for 1 week, like I think it's Basil week right now, right? And so you're posting, almost every day, if not every day. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a perfume that has that note or that material or that focus or that structure. And so for me, learning about perfume, that was so helpful and so educational. In fact, I still learn from your insights, from these, things, houses that perfumes that that I don't. So it's such a great part of our community, right? That we can share and learn from each other.
I agree, and it means a lot to me that I was able to help you out in that journey, because I know not that long ago I was sort of sorting it out too. It's like, and it means a lot to have those who share great insight, like blogs, like the blogs that you mentioned. Like there's so many of them that were hugely influential to me. And I love the idea of highlighting a certain note or a certain accord or style. And I'm sort of running out of it. What I think what I'm going to do is some of the ones that I've done on Instagram, I'm going to move them to YouTube later on, and then do like an iris video for YouTube. Oh, and cool. A rose video for YouTube, carnation, and et cetera, et cetera. So, and this week it's basil. I was like, can I even do a week's worth of basil? And sure enough, I was able to find 5 fragrances.
Yeah, I think that'd be so valuable. Yeah, it'd be so valuable for your audience and for everyone out there, because I'm sure there's new people jumping in every day, and then they'll have that catalog to go back to. So I think that'd be great.
What I love what you're doing right now on Instagram is you're doing these, they're kind of like reels for different years. Love it. And you're taking certain, ads and certain things from the popular culture at the time and integrating it with the fragrances. And I think that's brilliant too. I might have to copycat that in some sort of way too. But of course But of course I'll be like, well, it wouldn't be without Rachel here. This is my take on something that was Rachel's idea. And I just I think it's brilliant. For sure.
I'm actually right now I'm reorganizing my my vintage, like in my perfume collection. I have a couple shelves with vintage fragrances, and I'm reorganizing them. And I thought, this would be fun to do while I'm reorganizing them. So fun for everyone. Definitely inclusive.
Yeah, for sure. I just love that idea. I love doing chronology. I love kind of doing a theme that's focused on a decade or a year, and yeah, it's just fun to do those sorts of projects for sure. And Fragrance Enthusiast is here. Haven't seen your ass in charge. Well, maybe I'll put her in charge when she's a panel next Tuesday. I'll put her in charge for a while.
Margie in charge, always. And JJ, if it's okay, I might just turn my camera off just for a second so I can
of course.
help Diane, and I'll be right back.
Absolutely. Okay, and great. And then in a little bit, Roberto, once we get things lined up with Diane, our other guests, we'll bring the both of you in. Work is stupid. I mean, I suppose at times it can be, especially when it's taken away from fun and beautiful days outdoors. But yeah, I have those feelings sometimes about work for sure. So for folks who are tuned in, we currently have 18, now we have 19 people tuned in. Let us know what your scent of the day, afternoon, evening is. We'd love to hear. Well, some folks have already shared it. Rachel actually does not have a YouTube channel at this time, but that is subject to change. In the meantime, you can find her here, or you can find her on Dan's streams, Mr. Smelly. So she does make appearances on the live streams, and you can see her there, or you can follow her on Instagram. I'm doing a plug for you here.
Thank you.
Or you can follow her on Instagram. I have it right in the description, but rachel.k.ng. You can follow her at Instagram. All right, so I think what we'll do is we're going to bring in Roberto, because I don't want to keep him waiting much longer. I did promise it would be about 15 minutes in. So folks, please welcome Roberto Dario to Effluvium this week.
Hi everybody.
Hi,
Joseph. Thank you for making me guest of this magnificent time. It's very late now in Italy, the time difference, but I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for this invitation. And yeah, let's go on.
Of course, of course. I remember I first interacted with you some time ago when I was learning very early on, as an independent perfumer. I was self-taught and I was looking for mentors and stuff, and that's how I first learned of you. And I remember you were just always so friendly in the forums on Facebook, and I'm glad that we were able to keep in touch. And I'm just really excited to have a discussion with you during this stream. And we also have Diane. She has just entered the green room, the backstage, and we're going to bring her in as well. Forums on Facebook, and I'm glad that we were able to keep in touch. I'm just really excited to have a discussion with you. We currently have somebody who Diane. She has just entered the green room. I think we have somebody who has green that's forums on Facebook, and I'm glad that we were able to keep in touch. I'm just really excited to have a discussion with you. We currently have Diane,
I'm getting overlap here.
Yeah, me too. Well, can someone mute? Everybody mute so we can figure. Okay, so Diane, I think it's at your end. There may be actually something that's playing the stream live somewhere. It could be on your laptop or something else. I don't know if it's on your phone, but it's actually.
Okay.
Okay. So Diane, I think it's at your end. There may be actually something that's playing the stream live somewhere. It could be on your laptop or something else. I don't know if it's on your phone, but it's actually.
Okay.
Okay. So Diane, I think it's at your end. There may be actually. Diane, do you mind muting for a moment? I think it's on your end.
I'm muted. I'm muted.
Or something else. I don't know if it's on your phone, but it's actually.
All right. Okay.
Okay. So Diane, I think it's at your end. There may be actually. Diane, do you mind muting for a moment? I think it's on your end.
I am muted. I'm muted. I'm muted.
Or something else. I don't know if it's on your phone, but it's actually.
All right. Something crazy.
So Diane, I think it's at your end. There may be. Diane, I hate to do this, but you might get back to me later.
I am muted. I'm muted. I'm muted.
I don't think. Thank you. I don't know what's going on. Diane, do you? I'm sorry, I had to do that. Poor Diane. I had to remove her because I think she's trying to figure out like some logistical stuff on her end as far. I'm so sorry about that, guest. And I'm sorry for Diane because I know she's trying to do the stream on her phone, and it might be that it's still sort of playing in the background and causing sort of feedback, and hopefully she'll get that sorted out. And I do have my phone on me in case she reaches out to me, and she might reach out to you as well, Rachel, and hopefully we'll get that squared away. But in the meantime, why don't we get things started? I want to chat with you, Roberto, a little bit.
Yeah.
And the thing that I find most fascinating and unique about your path as a perfumer is you started from the world of organic chemistry, whereas like a lot of other perfumers, that sort of comes in incidentally. That was your origin, and I wanted just ask you a little bit about that. How did you land into chemistry in your studies?
Wow, that's something that happened a long time ago, and that's very interesting because I was a curious person, and I was not interested in chemistry. I was just studying. At the beginning of my studies, my intention was to be in biology. And but for some reasons, I don't know, at all the classes that I took, I was very good in chemistry. So the teachers say, why don't you go on this? And so at the very end, I degree in chemistry at the University of Naples. And I started very soon to work in the chemical industry as a researcher. And the second thing, that I was not interested in perfumes at all. I use perfumes, of course, just, to go out. But I was not interested in the smell. Yeah, it smells okay. I like it. I don't like it. That's it. Now, in the reason why that probably I do not put too much. I do not put too much attention on the scent part.
Right.
Because as soon I was working on a project that was to make coumarin. Okay, coumarin
Yes.
is the first molecule that I discovered later. Of course, was the first synthetic molecule to be put in perfumes. 1882, the first perfume was Fougère Royale by Houbigant.
Right.
Okay. And I was working on the synthesis, and I discovered reading the papers about this fact, and so I said, "Wow! So let's see how it smells." And so it was herb, it was hay. Okay, nice. So I started to be interested just like that, reading about coumarin, and then
Yes.
get straight in the perfume world. Okay, and from then there was another project that in another lab they were working on anisaldehyde. Okay, it's an anisic molecule. Excuse me for my English. And again, it intrigues me a lot, and so I start to pay attention on this sense. Okay, and this was the very starting point of all the story. And at some point I said, okay, yeah, I have the synthetic molecules, but I don't know what to do. Later I discovered the essential oils. That was we are talking about 2007, 2008. Okay. By that time, it was very difficult to have very good raw materials. And it was very easy to have essential oils because of aromatherapy. Was very easy to buy them. But again, okay, you smell, but I do not have, the right technique, the right words, to explain how to explain the correct meanings, okay, of the sense that I was smelling. And so I decided to take a break and to go to school again back. And so I discovered the summer school at Grasse in France.
Yes.
And this is the main path. And so I went to Grasse to learn how to smell and to learn to describe the sense, to describe how to describe using chemical words and emotional words. It seems easy at the beginning, seems very easy, but you need, in my opinion, you need always to have somebody that teach you how to do this.
Right. So from having that background to begin with, and then moving to the world of perfumery, I had a question for you. As a perfumer, how do you think that makes maybe your approach a little bit different than somebody who may not introduce chemistry into their discipline until later?
Well, I have a defect, I think, because every time I smell something, I try, especially for naturals, okay, I try to say, oh, how much geraniol is in this rose? How much phenylethyl alcohol is in this rose? Or how much benzyl acetate? So I always think about chemistry. And this is sometimes a defect because I'm straight on that path. I learned how to speak, as I said, on the emotions, so to make it more artistic. So yeah, to go back at your question, I don't think it is an advantage. It's just something different. It's something that, and I have a lot of questions from people, that ask me how to be a perfumer. It's possible to be a perfumer with different backgrounds. I always reply yes, because you even if you don't have a technical skill, chemistry, industrial chemistry, biophysics, or whatever, okay, but you are good at smell. You can recognize, at least at the beginning. If you had the chance to enter a course, a school, they will teach you the basic chemistry, so you will be able to follow that way too. So again, it's a different way of seeing things. Maybe I'm too chemical, but you can be artistic and technical at the same time.
Indeed. And I know there are ways to sort of rewire your brain to not not necessarily always approach things in a technical manner. I think that a lot of people in different artistic disciplines where there is a left-brained aspect, there can be that conflict. I've mentioned this before with like musicians. There is that balance between feeling and artistry and composition and theory, and it's the same thing with perfumery and other types of disciplines. But I do think that it is possible. It's just sort of training your brain to be able to shift from one side to the other, or to be able to combine them together. So what you're saying is, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's any advantage to starting with chemistry. It's just you may just have a different method to it because of that background.
That's right. After you will learn, you have to learn chemistry. You have to. No way, because the artistic part, it has to stay close to the technical part. Because when you put together a perfume, you have to consider, other than the emotion, so how the perfumer has to speak to the people, you have to consider a lot of technical questions about volatility, about the persistency. And so you have to use certain particular molecules or raw materials that can help you on that technical part.
Right.
And Roberto, do you mind if I ask a question? You'd mentioned that you went to Grass and you learned kind of how to put your impressions into words and how to communicate, with the wearer, with the consumer. I run a very small class, a perfume class for high school students, so kids age 16 to 18. And I'm wondering, maybe actually from both of you, both JJ and Roberto, what first piece of advice might you give a young person just starting out on this journey to maybe find that language to describe the materials that they're smelling?
Well, that's a nice question. It's something. It's not difficult, because once you learn about the strategy, everything comes easy. And what I mean for strategy, I mean you have to think in a scent in terms about what you see when you smell, what you hear when you smell. So start to use words that are related to the other senses. So if this the scent that you are smelling, it brings you a color. It's yellow, so it's solar. You have to let go any kind of impression that you have from smelling that kind of ingredient or raw material that you have. So you have to be free. I think that the right word, you have to be free. And once you start to talk, then you can say, okay, what when you smell this thing, what it reminds you? A flower, a wood, an amber. And so you start to classify, start to make your own classification. Then, okay, well, it's a flower. How is this flower? It's dark. It's shining. It's soft. So this is the way that you have to start to describe the scent. Then later, as we said before, you can start to use, you can use some chemical word, to describe the last, description.
I agree with that. It's sort of like you're learning sort of like a new language, and I love using analogs such as music, because I studied music as well. A little known fact is I studied music theory and composition. And it's sort of like, at the very beginning, you're just trying to understand like the vocabulary for it and how to, as you said, Roberto, how to articulate it, how to put it into words and communicate. And then over time, it's kind of like when you're learning how to read music, and you start off with very simple scales, but then you sort of layer other things on top of it, and then it comes together as a piece of music. And that's just, I think I always like to use because it's my two big loves, music and scent. There's a lot of things that cross over with it. And as you progress, you start to read the sheet music, as it were, and then the ability to understand how the materials come together to create. I mean, like, even listen to the vocabulary, like accords is sort of like music chords.
Of course.
And there can be movements.
Sure.
Like with the development of a fragrance. So sure. That's how I love using the music comparison. So yeah. That was a really good question too. And I love, Rachel, that you have this class that you do with kids. And I think that this has been such a neglected area for young people. Because much like the five senses, out of the five senses, it's the most neglected one as well. And I just think that it's great that you are carving out a space for that for young people, so they have a better appreciation for it. So that's really great. At this time, I think I want to bring in Diane, because the questions that we're going to ask will apply to both of you as well. So we're going to introduce Diane, sort of have her explain, a little bit of her journey as well. And then we'll get into, more of an organic conversation. So I'm just going to introduce Diane into the stream here. Hi. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well. Thank you. It's okay. It's it happens to the best of, like, I've been on streams where I've had some funky stuff going on, and it's like
it's so interesting to hear Roberto talk, because we're the opposite. I mean, just from where we came from.
The opposite attracted.
Yes, exactly. No, I mean, I wish my path could have been different, but at the time of my life and the circumstances of them that I got into perfumery, I mean, all of you know how hard it is to get one of the few spaces available in perfume schools. And I started studying while I was running a dairy farm. So I had to be here twice a day, morning and night. And so there were just things that weren't really possible for me to do. But I agree that, what I feel like I miss the most is having a mentor, somebody that I can work with on a regular basis. Because when you just work alone, you kind of lose perspective on your work. It's like if you cook Thanksgiving dinner and you're in the kitchen for 12 hours or whatever, and then you can't taste it at the end of the day.
Can you tell us a little bit about that mentorship?
You mean how I got into it?
Yes, I know that you had a specific mentorship, from what I've learned.
Yeah, so just to back up. So I was telling JJ this through Instagram, but I didn't get into perfume because I wore perfume as a young woman, or I remembered stuff my mother wore, or anything like that. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and all I ever wanted to do, the only thing I can remember is I wanted to leave the city. I wanted to ride a horse. I wanted to walk in the fields. I wanted to hike. I was a tomboy. That's just how it was. And that really has never changed. I mean, I have lived in cities as an adult, but so I think that I had an affinity for scent very early on from being outside. I eventually got a horse when I was a teenager, but we couldn't pay the board on it. So every weekend I had to go out and work. So, you know, horse barns, you're smelling leather, you're smelling horse shit, you're smelling sawdust, you're outside, it's the earth, it's the horse feet, it's their fur, it's intense smells that you never can get away from. So then when I went to college and when I finished that, I moved to England for 2 years. And when I came back, I moved to New York, and I went to the Columbia University School of Public Health and got my master's in public health, and worked in the city health department during the AIDS epidemic, and then moved to Vermont because we couldn't find an apartment we could afford. And I worked for the Vermont Department of Health. So I did that for many years. And then after I had my children, I decided it was time to stop working in government and, you know, spend all my time taking notes and going to meetings and actually do something. So I started apprenticing with a horse logger in Vermont. And then I got my own team of horses and I started farming with them. And then I moved to the farm I live on now and decided I would do what I had always wanted to do, which is milk cows. So I got a herd of Jerseys, and I built a creamery and got my license to run the creamery and started making artisanal butter.
Yes, which I would love to try.
I sold my business 2 years ago.
Oh, well, should I still try it then?
You should still try it.
Yes.
They're still making it. So, you know, I sold to 3-star Michelin restaurants. I sold at the French Laundry and Per Se, and restaurants in Boston and in Virginia. And I did that for 22 years. And about 6 years before I stopped, I decided I can't do this forever. I mean, it's really hard work. If any one of you has tried farming. So I found Eliza Douglas's name online. She at the time was working for Christoph, Laudemeal at Dream Air.
Yes.
But she was giving sort of lessons on the side, and she's British. She's a British perfumer. And I had written a cookbook at the time, and I was going down to New York to promote it. And she was doing a group lesson on that weekend when I was going. So I took her class, and I was like, this is it. I have to keep doing this. Yeah. But I couldn't get to New York very often because I was working, 12-hour days here between the creamery and the cows and inspections and everything else. So I met her in New York a couple more times, and then we did things by Skype because there wasn't Zoom then. And it was, so that's how it started.
So I wanted to ask you, you're very closely connected with animals, with nature, the ecology. Can you tell us how this is reflected in your approach as a perfumer and in your creations?
Yeah, so when I decided to start my own brand, I mean, I think the reason that I was successful in what I was doing on the farm with food And I don't know why they're, I mean, I had this discussion with Luca Turin when I started. He said to me, yeah, I mean, he knew the French Laundry and everything. And he said, I don't understand why more artisanal food people are not getting into perfume. I mean, so now there's lots of sommeliers, people that have been working in wine and cocktails that are doing it, but there still aren't a lot of food people, which I don't really get. But anyway, so I decided that I think the thing that rang true for me in my other business was that I was authentically into it. I wasn't trying to be an influencer. I wasn't trying to be who I wasn't. And I felt like I had to do the same thing with perfume. I didn't want to be some silly independent brand that had no purpose or viewpoint so I decided that I would start by my first 3 fragrances were sort of based on Vermont. Now there was a hay fragrance. Oh, I'm gonna now, my internet's gonna go a little zonky. I did a hay fragrance, which is First Cut. I did Gardener's Glove, which is about working in the garden. And I did Frost, which was about a poem written by Robert Frost.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of my other fragrances, Song of Aubrac is a Narcissus based.
It's beautiful.
And Edge Effects is, something about the border between 2 different ecosystems and what happens biologically in that area. And the only way I can make perfume is I have to have a really strong idea that resonates for me. And I have to keep going back and touching base with that idea to make sure, as I go along that. And I have to say that, so the way I met Christoph was through Eliza. I wrote him an email and I said, would you trade a pound of my butter for a little bit of your time?
That's a nice barter right there. Yeah.
And he said, yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. So I sent him my first 3 fragrances and, I don't know, he travels a lot and he tasted my butter and he loved it. And he said, okay, I'll get back to you, but he didn't. So I had to chase him down. But, what he said to me was, what is the point of your perfume? What are you trying to do here? Tell me what you're doing with every single one. And, do you think you've done it? And in one of mine, he was like, I don't smell any of the things you're trying to do. I was like, oh, okay.
I admire his candor.
Oh, yeah, he's not candid. So, but you know what? It's good because what I learned from that, which I've carried with me, and I don't know if it's true with you, Roberto, but sometimes when I sit down, my first 2 formulas are where I end up how many months later. But, when you start out, you have a very clear vision of what you want. And my process is I start like that, then I wander and maybe I find something I like, but then I don't really think, I'm not sure that's it. So I play around some more and then sometimes I get lost and then I circle back to where I started and pull some of the things that I did along the way into it.
Darren Allen, another peer in the perfume community, has a question for both of you. If you could go back in time and give advice to yourself as a young perfumer, what would you say? Roberto, do you want to answer that one? You have the option.
Well, go to school first. Go make it a choice, an early choice. I miss the, because when you're alone and you start to take lessons, the learning curve is very, very slow. So you need mentorship, you need people that teach you, and yes, definitely. If I could go back, I will take school earlier. That's my that's my answer.
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, I would have chosen perfumery earlier, but I didn't. So maybe if I was going to give advice to myself as a novice perfumer, I mean, just starting out, would be to probably try to hook up more concretely with somebody who could give me more time to, and more feedback. I think that's the thing, that when you come out of school and you go through the fragrance houses and you meet experienced perfumers, it's invaluable. So,
yeah.
So I wanted to ask both of you, because I love asking every perfumer that I interview, what components and natural materials most excite you and inspire you? We'll start off with you, Roberto, because I know this is sort of your specialty in your studies. What materials have most inspired you or resonated with you?
Labdanum. Labdanum for myself is something that resembles the world, because it's really connected to ancient perfumery. It's connected to the modern perfumery. It's amber, it's woody amber, and it's very dark. And plus, for me, is so masculine. And I always find myself working with this kind of materials. So I like woods, I like embers, I like spices. I learn to work with florals, but definitely resins and labdanum is my first choice in all my perfumes.
And Diane, I'd love to hear your answer too, because I just love the choice of materials in your perfume, and the take for example your Narcissus is incredible, and I would love to hear what are these materials that you've worked with that have that just most resonate with you, that you love the most.
Yeah. I don't usually start my perfumes from a material thing, like I want to do a beautiful rose, or I want to do I usually have an idea. I think that Song of Aubrac was the exception to that, but it fits into the things I love, which I love resins too. I love labdanum, I love styrax, I love benzoin, I love all those things. I like oak moss. I mean, like real oak moss, which you can't use, but I love those things. I love dirty notes. I love civet. I love castoreum. I love hyraceum. I love dirty musks. I mean, you would think that coming from where I come from, right? I love black currant bud. I love it.
Yeah.
I love Narcissus and Jonquil, but I also really enjoy playing with opposites in my perfumes. So I like countering like in Casablanca, something sort of dark and indolic and stinky with bright red mandarin and orange blossom. And I like I like how ingredients can have a conversation in a perfume and juxtapose each other. And so that's what I'm into.
No, I know. I love that. I love that. Great. And I also wanted to ask, Roberto, is there an opportunity for us to experience some of your compositions, some of your perfumes? Where can we get samples? Where can we buy them?
Oh, you can ask. You can ask it to me. Well, the main the main brand for which I compose perfume is an Italian brand, very small,
Mhm.
very niche. It's called DFG 1924,
Mm.
and you can see it's .it the website, so you can see all the perfumes that I made for them. All of
Mhm.
them are made by me. That's it.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
So there is. Probably I have not to see this because I worked as a ghost perfumer for a all natural perfume brand. It's from Denmark, and I should not mention that, but all three perfumes are made by me too, and are 100% natural. And the last in terms of time is that I compose the last three perfumes for this Italian brand called Venezia 1920. Okay.
Mhm.
And the last three perfumes that are named Peggy, Harry's, and Mosaic are dedicated. Well, the Venezia is a Venetian brand. Okay. So
Mhm.
so the last three are dedicated. Peggy is dedicated to Peggy Guggenheim. Okay, that there's a museum in Venice.
Oh, wow.
It's very nice. It's based on sandalwood, very very milky. I like it a lot. And Harry's is dedicated to the Harry's Bar, which
Uh-huh.
is a famous place in Venice, and so it's dedicated to its history because it's a place where all very important peoples used to go there and have um, and their drinks and talks and smoke, and so it's very mysterious. Is based on some reconstruction of marijuana. It's very nice too. And the last is Mosaic, and it's dedicated to the mosaics of the Basilica of the San Marco Basilica.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, the inspiration comes from the fact that the Serenissima Repubblica of the Venice was the queen of
Mhm.
the merchant ways, that goes to east. And so Venice, by the 1500, was the center of perfumery in Europe, because all the raw materials, they were easily for them to gain it, to bring it back to Venice. And so the Venetian perfumers, that was named muschieri
Mhm.
because they used a lot of animal musk in their
Mm.
perfumes. Okay, and so the idea of mosaic is based on the most important spice in the world, that is saffron.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
so it's based on saffron. Okay, just to give you the idea, it's dedicated to the San Marco Basilica.
Nice.
And if you don't mind, JJ,
Of course, of course.
Roberto, I look forward to trying your fragrances. I'm so excited. I actually have a coworker who's going to be visiting Venice for a few weeks this summer, so I'm going to write her a list of things to pick up for me and bring back.
Okay.
And then Diane, I've had the great pleasure of sampling and really loving and enjoying many of your fragrances. And I'm thinking of, as you're talking about these different materials and these inspirations, I actually had a question for both of you, and that is, Roberto, you're coming from a chemistry background, but you're also making completely 100% natural fragrances. And I'm curious, Diane, especially with your devotion to nature and really, living in nature and working with nature, what do you think, as perfumers, about this? It's a bit of a false division, but the spectrum from natural materials to synthetic materials? I know there's a lot of talk in the fragrance community, and that's a point of contention often. And there's, you know, obviously the EU and California and Korea and IFRA regulations and all that stuff, and there's going to be lots more to come, right? So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on working with synthetics versus naturals, and then B, how you see kind of the future of perfumery developing around synthetics versus naturals in terms of regulation, perhaps.
We can start. Diane, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I don't make all natural perfumes. I never planned to do that, but I would say that, you know, maybe my perfumes are usually 40 to 50% natural materials. So I do mix media because I feel like there are some things that just help accent the naturals in ways that would be harder if I didn't use them, I suppose. I think if people want to make natural perfumes, it's fantastic. I think it's going to get increasingly hard. I mean, we don't have the same restrictions here that Europe does, but they're coming. And I think you have to be mindful of them, especially around naturals and sensitization. And a lot of people don't use them because they're so expensive too. You know, they're getting more expensive. So, but you know, I know a lot of people that do that, and they do great work too.
Roberto, I know that you were inspired a lot by Mandy Aftel. I was reading about your discovery, of her through Essence and Alchemy. And do you still continue? You still continue to be 100% natural in your approach? Have you thought about moving to mixed media? Can you tell us?
Well, first of all, I really love to work with mixed media. I really love to work with synthetics because we have to remember that Ernest Beau, it was the perfumer of Chanel No. 5.
Yes.
He said that the future of perfumery is in chemistry. Okay. Mm-hmm. And he said that in 1921.
Right.
So we cannot imagine to make something, original without synthetics, because if there is the wave of green, the wave of nature, whatever. I have a client, they ask me to make 100 natural perfumes. I do it because it's my work.
Right.
But
right.
I do prefer to work both with synthetics and naturals. There are some synthetics that are more precious than naturals. There are some, the naturals give a lot of complexity, but we, as perfumers, if we want to make something original and really new, we have to work with both. Mm-hmm. No way. I think that naturality is something that people use to justify, just because naturals is safer is more safe than the synthetics. That's not true.
Right.
I think 100% natural is a lifestyle. Okay. Is niche de la niche de la niche. Okay, just to put it in French. It's a lifestyle. You join it, and that's it. Now, when I start, and I said, I start, with essential oils, but that was because that was the only materials that I have at disposal to make perfumes. Mm. I follow, I read that wonderful book of Mandy Aftel. But as soon as I get in synthetics, I really see that the potential of making originality.
Mm, mm.
And this is something very interesting, because now we are the perfumery world is flat. There's no novelties. because everybody use the same things and make the same themes because one theme is sells a lot, and so let's make something similar, and we are losing the originality in perfumery right now, even at the niche and artisanal part, I think.
Diane, yeah.
There are a couple of things. One is I think it's actually harder to make a good all natural perfume.
Sure. Yeah.
There's no puffery in it. There's no hedione. There's no linalool. There's nothing modifying anything. You've really, and to not get mud, to get something that speaks to exactly what you're trying to do very clearly and distinctly is very difficult and takes a lot of skill. Right. Now, there's natural and there's natural. There's a debate within the, Rachel's nodding her head, within the natural perfumery community around isolates. And, Mandel uses them. She uses geraniol. She uses citronella. She has isolated, orris, ionone materials. But there's some people that don't want to do that either.
Right, because they argue that because of the synthesis of the isolate,
you're taking it from the natural, it's one molecule or something, right, as opposed to, which is true.
Yeah, it begs the question is, where does natural end and synthetic begin? It's exactly. A debate. And obviously for the natural perfumer, they face a huge challenge in making a natural perfume that really has structure and bones to it,
right?
So they're reaching for these isolates.
Framework.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question for you. What is real? Let's talk about going out from the perfume world. Let's talk about natural. Okay, for you, cheese is natural.
There's some processes.
I
mean, Diane, you'd be the expert in answering that.
I mean, cheese has a lot of. It's not just that doesn't come out of the cow, right? The milk is there, and you have to do things to it. There's a process.
Well, cheese is not present in nature. A human being, they put biochemistry in.
Sure, there's molds, there's all sorts of things, lactobacillus, things introduced, of course.
No.
And then you age it.
It's natural or not? It's something that a man make or not?
But it is the question, what is really natural? We could argue that the origins of petrochemicals are natural because organic matter was necessary in order for it over millennia to
oil come from the earth,
right?
And the earth is all this organic matter that is in flux and changing chemically. That's the thing that I find really amusing is the word chemical used, and Pia, our guest last week, we were discussing this, how the word chemical has become synonymous with dangerous, which is pretty absurd because everything is made up of chemicals. Right, and that we're in this culture right now, then anything that it's kind of, a little bit of regression because anything that we don't understand, we're going to label it as dangerous. It's the age-old sort of, limbic brain kind of thing that humans have, that if we don't really have an understanding of it, then we should avoid it. And it's being applied to so many different things like food and personal care products, etc. Right. Like the thing that frustrates me the most is the tagline that a lot of these, natural, green brands say, if you cannot pronounce it, you shouldn't put it in your body or put it in your skin, which is absolutely absurd. Because, there are a lot of things that are in our bodies, that would be difficult to pronounce. It's just so reductionist,
We produce indole.
We do.
Indole is present in jasmine. So.
Right. These are at this point sort of silly discussions, right? But last week, I think Pia noted it online. There was a brand that was saying that, they were all natural because things like Lyme disease were connected to synthetic fragrances. I mean, it's like, what?
What?
Yeah, like there's a tick involved there, folks, and it it does nothing.
But the ticks are natural. They're natural. They're small animals.
So it's a little. It's just this greenwashing that
Yeah.
I think is so confusing to people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of bad stuff in the environment that DDT and things like that should have been banned and we don't want around, but it's a dose response thing, and let's keep it in perspective. But now I feel like it's like swarming all the new regulations that
it's reflecting on this hysteria over things being potentially perfume, being dangerous,
being all chemicals and and irrelevant to our lives.
Yeah. We have a pretty good question that came through here, and I think any one of us could answer that. Around which year did they start replacing real ambergris with synthetic? Well, I don't. I kind of think that was pretty early on in wide scale commercial perfumery. That unless you were really the top echelon, like very high end perfume, it was used, and it's still used in perfume today. It really is, even in pretty sizable indie brands. But I would say that was a very long time ago with the development of replacements. The 60s, yeah. I would say with the introduction of what would become Ambrox and et cetera, and creating sort of an ambergris accord, because you can't just throw the Ambrox in and expect that to replace it. But the ingenuity of perfume scientists putting together replacements for it. So yeah, probably, yeah, you're right. Yeah, probably around the 60s or so. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just do you want to read more of the messages first, or should I ask?
No, please go ahead.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. So I was wondering, actually, speaking of science and ideas and progress, what are you all interested in? Like, what is exciting for each of you, Diane or Roberto? What's exciting you right now about anything in perfumery? Maybe it's a new technology or a material or something quite ancient, but just curious what is in your mind and what's exciting you right now.
That's a good question. Well, I have to mention, strictly speaking, about perfumes. My last work was for multisensorial exhibition. I had the pleasure to make some aromas and scents for multisensorial exhibition in Brescia, that is a city near Milan, where they have restored the two big paintings of Tiepolo. And these paintings are the biggest from this Italian painter. And I really liked it. I had this very nice experience to match what an ancient painter could smell while he was working on his painting. So I have to study. I have to take notes about all the materials he was using during all the old painters were using, artists they were using during their work. And so I create a path of all these materials. So I had to create the smell of the tissue, of the linen tissue that they use for their paint, where they paint, or the smell of the solvents that they use, the particular solvents that they use, the smell of the wax they use when they were in the dark, so they had to make candles with that. So that sort of things. It was very, very interesting for me to go deep in the world of scent without thinking too much to perfumes, because something the glue, the animal glue that they use to put together the wood parts, the frame, that was very interesting. It's made from the rest of the rabbits,
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it was very stinky thing because I had
I imagine so.
I had the opportunity to work with the restorers of these paintings, and they show me the materials, the original materials that they still use.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very interesting. So I was taking this little journey apart from technique, from chemistry, and it's sort of communication between art and the world of scent.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, my next project that I'm working on is again a sort of, I'm thinking of starting a series of scents based on the idea of working landscapes. And because I feel like at least in rural America, we're sort of losing that in many places, and Vermont is one of those places. So
Right.
I read an obituary this winter of a woman who died at the age of 102, and she was a hill farm, lived on a hill farm way up in the mountains with her husband in the 40s and 50s. She had just died, but and she had a small herd of jerseys, and she was well known because she was originally from Germany and moved to Vermont. And her little herd won all these awards for the cleanest milk, having the lowest somatic cell count. But anyway, she was a one-woman show. She was married, but she did the milking, she did the cooking, she had a garden, she made jams, she canned everything in the root cellar. She had a prize-winning herd of jerseys, and and I'm sure had a lot of pride of place. And I really want to capture all of those things: the wooden farmhouse, the wood stove, the gardens, the fruits, the cows, the leather harnesses the horses were wearing, the dirt, all of that, as a tribute to her. So I've been doing research on that, and I don't know if you guys know it, but every time I release a scent, I do have a piece of art go with it. So I am, because I think the visual can help people get into the perfume, and I like doing it. I like the connection. So I'm gonna have somebody do some drawings for me of all of those facets that go with the perfume.
That's so amazing, and I really think that scent is such a huge part of our intangible cultural heritage, and I'm so happy that your projects are really addressing that. I think it's so important for humanity and for people to experience. Just wanted to say that. So cool. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, it's really cool. What would you say, and this is for both of you as independent perfumers, what right now in the landscape, what do you think are the most challenging things for an independent perfumer today in 2023? We'll start with you, Roberto. What do you think is the most challenging thing facing independent perfumers?
Well, it's a hard question.
I have heavy hitters sometimes.
Now, the thing is that as an independent perfumer, the cost of the raw materials right now are rising very fast. They are reached a take price that I never seen in all the years that I was I was working. So for me right now, the main problem is to try to make my cost reasonable for my clients. And it's but it's very tough. It's very tough because as I said, it's really difficult to find the right reseller. It's very difficult to find the right distributor. I usually work with distributors because I do not go directly to the farmers, because it's I cannot buy few grams of let's say jasmine, because it's not enough for me. I have to deal with several clients, so the cost right now of the raw materials is something that triggers me a lot.
Diane.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Especially naturals have gone really crazy. I mean, and I understand why. I think the climate and the unpredictability of it, and probably so many things too, having to do with the fragrance houses, but are affecting farmers and processors. But, if you're, I mean, I'm smaller than Roberto, but I assume, but even just getting access to some things is really hard, because I have to buy through middlemen, Perfumer's Apprentice, Perfumer's Supply House, and I mean, I can't go straight to the distributor. I can't go to LMR and, well, when they weren't bought by IFF, but now I really can't go and say, I want your Narcissus. I have to find somebody that will carry these expensive materials in small quantities. So that's a real challenge as a small perfumer, is just getting the materials you want, period. And then, and paying for them. And then when you're small, you're doing it all. I'm doing it all. I'm buying my materials. I'm keeping my inventory. I'm writing my formulas. I'm making the perfume. I'm trying to cut through all the noise that is now the perfume world. I mean, there's a million brands every day. There's somebody else doing something who has a lot of PR money behind them. And there's not the level of perfume reviews, or I feel like nobody's sorting it out. It like the trash from the not trash. And now, some of that's subjective, but some of it's like, are they making perfume that smells like anything or says anything? And it's so determined by Instagram and social media. And that's all influence.
Yeah.
Influence. And it's money, it's how cute you are. I don't know what it is, but so it just and I don't want to whine about it, but it's doing a lot of work in a very, it seems, really overcrowded.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. As a writer and a reviewer and an analyst of perfume, not nearly as long as some people who have inspired me to do this. But the whole new frontier of social media going at such a fast speed, it's like I've actually had people say to me, don't write as much because people are not going to read it. And that is probably one of the most depressing things that I've ever had say to me. People are not going to read it. And I hate to do this, and I'm going to do this on my very own live stream right now. I'm going to call out the fact that this is a very amazing conversation that I'm having with my guests here and with Rachel. And even when I do these live streams, I see such a precipitous fall from the first 30 minutes. And I wonder if that has something to do with the change in attention span that is taking place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I notice it. And it's, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm not going to change my format. I'm going to keep doing it. But it's a matter of trying to find out where your audience is now. It's not as easy. It's not as easy to tap into the audience, because I think you're absolutely right. This is a culture now with social media where the influencer has so much control, and it becomes this rather unhealthy relationship with commerce in order to make that sustainable for them, because it becomes sort of a job, a business, and that can crowd out those who are actually providing a little bit more, perspective on fragrance and really discussing it and telling stories and the technical side of it and everything. And it becomes reduced into buzzwords and phrases, the catchy things, and it becomes so
well, it's segmented like everything.
segmented. Yes,
You
exactly.
know, so you're only going to buy perfume from people that say their packaging is a certain way, or they're
Yes.
all natural, or
Yeah.
it's made by this kind of person from this
Yeah.
heritage or this. I mean, we're all like in our little groups, and and I think even in social media, I'm sure on the feed, you only get what you want to hear. I mean, it's
It
so
gets to be like an echo chamber, which is not to digress too much out of the conversation of perfume in general, but it is a result of the change in politics as well.
right,
You know,
or
because
where people's heads are at.
people become tribal because they're just listening to what and nodding in agreement. Yes, I agree with you. This is my tribe. And it even happens, I think, in some cultures as well as perfume, that it becomes like siloed, and that's unfortunate, because I think that for independent perfumers, new houses that are innovative or show an artistry that hasn't been seen in a while, they get kind of lost. They don't even end up getting absorbed into any of these silos, because it's not easy to fit them into one of them. So yeah, I obviously have a lot of gripes about it, but
I will say I completely agree with what everyone is saying, and I will say for me at least, one little bright spot. And there are bright spots, but
we do need those. Yes.
Yeah, one little bright spot is the Institute of Art and Olfaction.
Yeah.
Yes.
The work that they do is tremendous. It's kind of like really getting the word out about great indie and artisanal perfumers. And because Claire, you're here, I have to just ask, because one of my favorite perfumes that you make is Gardener's Glove, which was I believe 2019 Art and Olfaction Award finalist. May I ask, just while you're here, while we have you, could you tell us a little bit more about that fragrance? It was even mentioned in Nay magazine, their latest edition. It's very well known in the community, and especially among very serious, creators and people. So, would you mind walking us through it a little bit?
Yeah, I did have another finalist perfume too, which was Eve. That was also, but so the concept was very simple, really. It was about what an old pair of leather gloves would smell like if you were working in a garden. Now, I got to choose what was in the garden. So I used a lot of, rich florals. I used rose and jasmine. And I had a lot of woody, resinous smells, like you're cutting the branches and the twigs, so there's sap on your gloves. So I had the flower petals, the sap, and then there were grassy smells from going in the underbrush. And I had a vegetable garden too. I used tomato leaf at the top. And then, of course, it was sunny, because you're in the garden when the sun's out. So I had a lot of citrus aromas, and it was the right combination. And and the leather from the gloves, obviously, the suede leather. So it and then I just think calling it Gardener's Glove, like what it was also a simple concept, but when all those things came together, it worked.
So, Roberto, I know with your experience working with natural materials, I thought I might ask you for some of the audience who may be a little bit less familiar with the extractions, natural materials, extractions of natural materials, to explain the difference between an essential oil, an absolute, and a CO2 extraction, which a lot of folks may not be familiar with. I'm familiar with it from dabbling in perfume, but a lot of people may not be aware with it. Could you help us define each of those?
Okay. So let's start with essential oil. When we talk about essential oil, we mean all the materials that comes from steam distillation. Steam distillation is a technique of extraction that uses water in its vapor form, and where the vegetable materials are, the steam pass through the vegetable materials and goes through the membrane of the vegetal membrane and extract this oils that vaporize instantly with the vapor, and then at another part of the apparatus, there is a refrigerator of this material that transforms in liquid, and the essential oil stands on the water, and it's separated at that stage. So essential oil comes from steam distillation.
Okay.
Absolutes is a different kind of extraction, and the technique, it's called solvent extraction, and the solvent is usually hexane. Hexane boils around 60 degrees, so it's the right temperature that preserves the aroma, the smell, the olfactive profile of the vegetable material. So once the vegetable material is put together in contact with the hexane for 2 or 3 hours. During this time, the hexane extracts all the materials, so the aromatic part and the wax part of the plants. So at a certain point, this is separated, and this solution of the hexanic solution is evaporated. We recover the hexane, and we obtain what is called concrete. The concrete is the wax plus the aromatic material. To separate the wax, the vegetable wax, from the aromatic material, we put all of this into ethanol, alcohol. We stir it for a couple of hours, and the alcohol extract the aroma materials and leave alone the wax. So we separate it at the end, and the alcoholic solution is evaporated. We recover the alcohol, and what is left is the absolute. So now the CO2 extraction is more or less a solvent extraction. Why? Because the CO2, the carbon dioxide, under pressure, high pressure, and at low temperature, liquefies, and it becomes a very good solvent. It's a polar solvent. And so again, if I put vegetable materials together with this liquid CO2, the liquid CO2 will extract all the aromatic material and the waxes again. So the only way we separate the vegetable part, and to take away the CO2, we just put the apparatus. We drive the apparatus at the atmospheric pressure again, and at room temperature. So the CO2 goes in the gas phase, and it left the CO2 extract. More or less, it's just like this.
Fascinating. And my question is, with the CO2, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of using a CO2 as opposed to an absolute? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the main advantage is that if I use CO2, when we take the apparatus from 80 psi to atmospheric pressure, the CO2 goes in the atmosphere, is not going to stay in the aromatic material. While if I use hexane, even if I try to take it away at my best, to evaporate it at my best, that will be part per million of hexane that will remain into the natural raw material. So it's a question of quality, let's say. For me, they are about the same.
Mhm.
For an aromatherapist, maybe it's better to use CO2 extract than the absolutes because it's same content.
Right, right.
That's
For
the main reason.
yeah, for the
So,
sake of so-called purity, that without that, yeah.
It's a question of quality. Now, of course, the two materials have a different olfactive profile. If you have an absolute of jasmine and you have a CO2 extract, the CO2 extract will be more closer than the real scent of jasmine than the absolute.
Oh, yeah. That's one thing that I was familiar with some of the CO2s, especially the florals. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a matter of nose. It's a matter of how you use your nose and what is the effect that you want to have into the perfume.
Right.
For example, I used for a perfume that I made for a client. I have to use ginger.
Yeah.
Using the essential oil. Okay, the essential oil was lemony, but has a kind of smell that remembers me the household detergent.
I remember that the difference between the two, the ginger essential oil doesn't really remind you very much, does it? Yeah.
Really, it's just like you open by the hand the root. It's fantastic. So it's a matter of how you want to use the material and what is the olfactive profile you want to recreate, etc.
Do either of you use CO2 extractions in some of your work? Yeah, yeah.
And I was going to say, I think they smell closer to the real thing.
Yeah, I find that a lot of them seem to be, I wouldn't say nature identical, but like closer to what they would smell in the headspace, as it were, than a lot of the absolutes. And we know that a lot of floral absolutes and even
there is
herbal.
one disadvantage in using CO2 extract that seems that they are not stable as the essential oil or the absolute. So you have to use it combining them. So you have to make your own bases.
Right. And that's what's amazing about blending and stuff is it's like, there are ways of combining different materials so that they sort of support each other, Like I can imagine that, having some of the absolute supports the CO2 because of that instability. But then, there are aspects even in the absolute that lend a certain quality that may be absent in the CO2 and vice versa. It's really cool stuff. For a lot of for the viewers who are tuned in, a lot of the floral absolutes, they only give you sort of like a part of the picture as far as the flower. Like I know that for some floral absolutes, it almost smells like if you were to take the flower, crush it and dry it and like do something else. Like it doesn't smell like the fresh flower, but rather certain, there's the components that are there, but that whole process kind of burns it or boils some of the aspects out of it. Which I find interesting. The one that I always think of is like Carnation Absolute, which is very cool when used in a fragrance, but wouldn't really necessarily smell like, a fragrant carnation, what you would expect a fragrant carnation to be. Are there certain...
Narcissus is really, the absolute is very rich and indolic and sort of animally, but the daffodil is fresh and clean and they're really different.
It's so concentrated, like you can identify it as coming from it, but it isn't. It's like a very, it's like this really concentrated version of it that brings out certain qualities that you can't pick up smelling like a poet's narcissus. Yeah, it's cool. But then there are some where it's like you smell it and like you can immediately identify it. There's things like, ylang ylang essential oil to me, especially like an extra, smells so much like the flower. So there are examples like that as well. Like Mimosa Absolute to me, I mean, it smells like a denser, more pollen-y kind of version of Mimosa, but that's kind of recognizable too. And then things like Linden Blossom. So, that doesn't smell to me like anything like the flower at all. Like it's not even recognizable. So, are there certain notes, Diane? Like, well, I mean, I don't know if you work in terms of notes or, accords and that sort of thing, but are there certain materials or scents or what have you that you just don't really gravitate to, that you wouldn't really incorporate into your compositions?
This is for the record. This is the best nose in the house here.
This
is Yuki.
Hi, Yuki.
Dog.
It's always great to have pets make an appearance. Hey.
Well, she's not mine. She's Christoph's. She's here being babysat. So while he's away.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cute.
She's the best nose in the house.
Truly, as a canine for sure.
Yeah, that's so awesome. It's so cute.
So what were you asking me? What things? Oh, what I was going to say about that is, I think what really strikes me about learning to be a perfumer, or probably just getting into scent, is it's so much like when you're a kid and you start eating real food, you're really fussy. There's like, you won't eat fish, you won't eat this, you think you don't like that. And that as you go on and get older and are exposed to more things, oh, you do like fish and you will eat caviar and you will eat slimy things. And I think the smelling thing is the same. You start down this rabbit hole and you're sure you don't like this or you don't like that, and this is your favorite and that. But then you realize that they all have something to offer. And eventually, if you just keep doing it, they all have a role to play, or you're just going to really limit yourself, I think. I mean, I love green materials. I absolutely love them. And I love perfumes that are green. But I used to think I didn't like lavender. Well, I love lavender now. Now I can't use it or the Absolute because of IFRA. But
God. Have they? How have they restricted it? How bad is it now?
The Absolute is bad. It's bad. I mean, you can use the essential oil, but they're so different to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, I feel like, that it is like food. That the more you get into it, your palate just broadens, your nose palate, and it's always amazing to me to find something some facet of something that I'm working with that's new, which is pretty much why every perfume I do try to take on something else. Like I think musks are hard. I think musks are really hard. And so I'm doing a musk perfume now, and I'm finally smelling different things, and the juxtaposition. But sometimes you really have to work at it. I mean, the first few years I did perfumery, I didn't really smell Hedione. I got the concept of it, but I didn't really smell it. Then one day you start smelling it, and it just goes on like that. It's amazing.
Right.
What you can do.
It's the same with a few of those blenders. Like at first, when I first smelled Isoe Super on its own, I'm like, what's the point of this? And now it's like as soon as I smell certain fragrances that are dosed highly with it or overdosed, it's like that's all I can think of.
You're blown out of the water. Yeah.
It's just like, oh man, this is just like totally relying on Isoe Super. And musks can be like that too. If there's certain musks that you get familiar with, and it's like, wow, this is really carrying everything else in this fragrance. Roberto, are there any materials that you're not as crazy about in working in compositions, or are you open to using anything? Tell us.
Usually, I don't like to work with aromatic herbs.
Oh, I see.
basil, tarragon,
Yeah.
because they do not talk to me.
Ah, that makes sense.
That's the thing. I have to be involved mentally, and
Right.
there is something they do not attract me. I have to work with. I have to know their chemical composition,
Yeah.
and sometimes I just made some shortcuts and using one or two molecules just to give the hint. But I'm not using the natural raw material to make a whole composition. That's it. I like more spices than aromatic herbs.
I love aromatic herbs. I remember when I was doing experimentation, I would like just like a whole like kitchen cabinet of herbs and compositions, like throwing in like sage and thyme and rosemary, and I loved tarragon too. Like I love that smell of estragol. But I can totally understand where that's not going to resonate for everyone. It can be an acquired taste, especially in perfume. I mean, there are going to be some people who are like, I don't want to smell like things that I would smell in a kitchen, but I welcome that. I'm like all about it. But then there's also the thing too, like even with things that you may not necessarily like on their own or wouldn't feature them in a large quantity in a composition, I guess through learning as a perfumer, you realize that there can be value in it being used as sort of like a modifier to kind of like adding like a little pinch of it to add this je ne sais quoi. So
at that point, I use more chemicals. I use more aroma chemicals. And that comes my chemistry, chemistry part.
Right.
Simplify things.
Yeah, totally.
Because all the herbs, especially, they bring with them the key component. Let's say, for example, for lavender, you say linalool acetate. But there are so many other things. You have to choose to make a lavandin or lavender, so you have to choose to put in camphor or not. I don't want it too fresh. I don't want it too floral, so maybe it's better, I don't know, linalool, so going another way. That's the kind of consideration, that there is one thing that I use, the most, but again, it's because of his uniqueness, is bergamot. Bergamot is something that I put in every perfume that I make, because the freshness, the floral part of bergamot is unique. And it's simple. If you go to see the chemical composition is simple, but if you put together that chemicals, you will not have a real bergamot. So you have to to train your nose. You have to exercise a lot, and at the end, bergamot oil, essential oil, is the best.
Yeah, I put it in everything too.
And
it lifts everything.
Yeah.
It's bright. It's floral. It covers all the bases. I mean, sometimes you have to go further with another citrus, but it's such a beautiful material.
That's like another what you would call sort of like a blender. It kind of just like brings everything else together, especially in the top notes. And like, and even in a lot of perfumes where fragrance enthusiasts who are looking at like a notes breakdown or a notes pyramid, they may see bergamot there, and it's certainly there, but they may not see bergamot there, and it's certainly there as well, because it is such an instrumental tool in perfume making, that I think it would be surprising for for perfume enthusiasts to realize, when we're looking at a composition, there are many things that are there that, for a particular perfumer who wants to, share a notes breakdown, not everything that's in that composition put into that is going to show up in that breakdown.
Right.
It's not going to say, because it's not necessarily highlighting it as a note in the composition, but it's there for a different purpose. So,
well, the sum of the parts are bigger than each individual. I mean, once they all get together, it either works or it really doesn't. But if it works, you're not going to always smell those individual components.
Right. Rachel.
And
Oh, I was going to say this. This question about bergamot actually makes me wonder, and I've heard perfumers say, actually, I cannot answer this question, so please feel free to decline answering this question. But how would you describe your style of perfumes? You know how sometimes you can smell a scent and go, oh, that's a Ropion, or oh, that's a Roussel, or etc. Is there a certain structure or group of materials or style or point of view, or how would one, if you could, say, how would one identify, oh, that's a St. Clair, or oh, this is a Roberto's perfume? Just curious if you know what it is, or if it's something that other people have like seen in you that maybe you yourself don't even. I'm curious about that. If you feel like you know your house style, your perfumer style, your
That's
identifiable it factor in the perfume.
Great question.
I do. I do. I mean, I think perfumers should know that. I don't know. I mean, I mean, you guys have, except for Roberto, have smelled my things. I think it's a pretty clear sort of vintage style. I don't tend to. I think that some people, I mean, I don't know how to say this. I don't want to get defensive, so I'm not going to say it. But I think I don't make perfume the way modern fragrance houses make perfume by, putting large quantities of sort of fillers in there, ISOE and Hedione and PEA and whatever the filler of the day is. I think I tend to make things in a more old-fashioned way with smaller amounts of things that I want to work together rather than, you know what I'm saying. So I think I would say that my style is more like vintage perfume.
I would be inclined to agree with that approach, and and then you also you don't have anybody breathing down your neck to have to set limitations on, like, you can only use a certain amount of this and a certain amount of that. We have shareholders that we need to satisfy. We have bean counters that are going to tell. So because you have that kind of freedom as an independent perfumer, what's great is that you can. And I don't want to use the word indulge because it sounds kind of cheapens it, because it's so much greater than that. But you have the ability to really to show reverence for these materials and let them really flourish in your compositions in ways that we're not really seeing in too much commercial perfumery and haven't in a long time. Yeah.
I'm also not having evaluators do consumer testing on it. And probably if I did, most people wouldn't like them because they're not used to smelling. Some of my stuff's pretty intense. I mean, the animalics are pretty big, and I don't know. They're just not there's not as much space in them. Is a nice way to say it. So, I wouldn't pass that test probably.
Pep describes your work as a transparent density.
Oh,
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. So it's almost like I would be inclined to agree with that, because you have this ability to allow the certain things to breathe within the composition, but there is still that there's so much body to it. There's so much. It really speaks to somebody like me, and I gravitate, Rachel, this, like I gravitate to naturalism and supernaturalism. I remember Pia Long, our guest last week, where I love that agrestic quality, evoking, nature and the outdoors, but in a way that is still perfumistic. It isn't sort of, I'm at a farmer's market kind of thing. It's like much more profound to me. And I can't help but to gush, but
balance. It's a delicate balance.
It's a delicate, I'm sure it is a delicate balance. Yes. Roberto, how would you best describe, your style? I want to hear a little bit more from you on that.
Classical.
There you go.
Always I try to to find a different way of mixing. I just find myself always in a classical fashion. I admit them, and but but I love it. I love it, and the quality of things that that I make. It's something that people, my clients, like it too, and I always had a lot of congratulations. So I think that my style, it's well recognized in between all my clients. And I am, if I knew this, Joseph, I probably, as soon as you told me about this this event, maybe I could send you samples of my perfume, so it will be could be nice, to know what you think about. So maybe we can make another.
We should do a follow-up. I have this tendency to I'm so eager to have my guests who I admire so much, and then I forget, like, wait a second, I need to see some of their work. But you're absolutely right. I would love to. It would be a pleasure to experience your work.
Okay, so it's a promise. I will send you all the samples that I made for these several brands, so we can make another arrangement and we can talk.
Fun. That would be fun.
Well, there will be another season of Effluvium starting next September too, and many of the panelists from this season will return. So I would look forward to having both of you back next season. Yeah, that'd be great. Great. Does anybody in the chat have any questions for our guests? Any sort of comments? We currently have 22 people tuned in. Rachel, did you have any other sort of questions in your list of questions here?
I'm just so delighted. I'm learning so much and just enthralled. And so we're humbled and delighted and thankful that
I just want to say something about the perception of quality that now is in perfumery.
Of course.
And I want to go back at the question about about these influencers, that are talking about perfumes, about the number of brands of perfumes that are coming up every year. Well, I was in Milan for Essence this year, the spring exhibition about artistic perfumery, and all I can smell around was ambrosinide, this powerful aroma chemical that now everybody uses for just one reason. Well, not the only one, but most. The first reason is for longevity, because now customers used to ask for, is this perfume persistent? How much it stays on the skin, 1 day, 2 days, 2 hours, whatever, because now people just want that. When they don't, for me, sometimes they don't care about what they put on their skin or they perfume themselves. They just want this to be persistent. They want to be, they want this kind of, dress that you have to wear for 1, 2, 3, 4 days. That's their meaning, their conception of quality. And this is bad. This is really bad.
It is.
Okay. Jan was saying before, maybe if I go to some evaluators, her perfumes will not be evaluated good, and that's that. I just feel from the words that I said that I'm saying that these perfumes are beautiful because they go out of these regular perfumes that we are smelling all over the time.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that bothers me a lot, because when I cannot imagine that quality is just equal to longevity. No, where is the originality? Where is the okay, you can buy a perfume and you can dress it several times. Why do you have to just 2 or 3 sprays and pretend that the perfume stays all day long. And this is, and if we start to talk about these influencers and, you know, whatever, they always say at the end, because this perfume stays so long.
Yeah.
And the people, they grab that.
Yeah. And it ends up being a feedback loop. And I'm seeing certain brands on Instagram, because Instagram's really good with the algorithms. It's not that smart. It doesn't realize that I'm a very certain kind of fragrance enthusiast, but they're going to just throw any kind of fragrance related advertising at me. And there's like these brands that the main focus of this brand is that it will get you compliments and then it will last a long time. And these are brands. These are brands that are the only thing discussed in the advertising are those two things. There's like whole video commercials where the guy's talking about like, and there's this one girl who sat next to me. She pretty much sat on my lap. And she said, man, you just smell amazing. You smell amazing. Can we go on a date? Yeah. And this is like for brands. Like, where are these brands coming from? Like, is this some crazy kind of like venture capitalist crap that's going on? Like, where there's not even a concept besides the fact. And often they're directed to males. There are some that are directed to females in both genders, but some of them are specifically for males. And they're talking about the kind of compliments they'll get from the opposite gender, because usually that's what it's all about. The opposite, attracting, somebody of the opposite gender. There's no discussion of any other variable. And the fact that it will last so long that they'll smell it on their clothing after they wash it, which to me is kind of, terrifying. I mean, I don't want it to be embedded, which brings me to Margie's question, because one material that is really good at never being fucking washed out of clothes is Ambrosinide. And she asks, how does Ambrosinide smell? Roberto, I think any of us who, I've smelled it too, and I've used it begrudgingly. But Roberto, can you describe for Margie and the rest of us how it sort of smells? Like, what is it doing?
Well, okay. Ambrosinide is, it belongs to the amber family.
Yes.
It's very powerful. And for me, the first image that comes in my mind when I smell it is a ball, with all spines on, that goes right through up the nostrils,
Mm-hmm.
and it occupies all my olfactory. In fact, as it is so powerful that you smell it once, after you have to wait a couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes to smell it again.
Yeah.
So it's pungent. Okay. It's overwhelming. It's ambery for people that knows what is amber, because we have to talk about what is amber, what is woody ambers.
Yeah.
And so it's pungent, okay, overwhelming. It's for me, Ambrosinide has a little bit of cooling effect, okay, in his heart, and can be warm, okay, very very intense, very intense.
I recall it first when it was first developed. I don't think it was first developed with the intention of how it's really necessarily used today, because I do detect it in some fragrances, that I really like, that are actually amber fragrances to kind of extend the amber top notes and for it to last a little bit longer. It's like, in a trace. And I know it's there because I'm familiar with it, in isolation. And I think that that's where it probably was maybe intended by whoever developed it. But what's fascinating to me is that over time, it's almost sort of like this viral thing where like one perfumer decides to overdose it. that somehow gets gets to be popular. And then, another brand or another house wants to be like, hey, me too, I want to do something like that. And then it becomes sort of this thing where the whole, like marketplace is just inundated.
Plus, ambrosinide and all the woody ambers molecules have a really good, they work very good with oud bases and oud perfumes.
Yeah.
And the connection between these, because when people smell that, oh, it's oud. No, it's not oud.
Yeah.
It's woody amber.
Right.
And you have to explain it every time. But this connection, because of the oud, wave, it's almost 10 years that maybe from the beginning, from when I start to make perfumes, that comes out the oud wave. All the woody ambers are connected. Norlimbanol, ambrosinide, Amber Max,
and
it's all connected with the oud wave. And so that if brands want to make oud, that it's not oud, they just put ambrosinide in.
Yeah, it's come to the point where an oud note or an oud concept in perfume has become so diluted, and almost like those who are developing these briefs or whatever's going on are relying on people not really knowing what oud smells like, and they're just running with it like this is the exotic oud fragrance. But much of the time, it's like, no, this is not what oud smells like. Like, I've burned agarwood chips, sort of like as an incense, and I've smelled atars. And granted, there are some perfumes in the market, and they mostly are, indie brands and niche brands or whatever, that do, approximate that. But the amount of times where oud shows up as a note or even shows up in the name of a fragrance, and it really doesn't have anything to do with it. It just doesn't evoke it at all. It's become, I've even seen Febreze with oud. Febreze, or Glade, kind of like oud vanilla. Like that's what it's come down to in functional fragrance now. Like they're using that as the trendy kind of thing.
Just to mention one brand, Montale,
Yes.
or has made the fortune or his fortune on an oud base, okay, mixing it with all kinds of raw materials.
Yeah,
really, with all the kinds of raw materials they have in the lab.
Yeah.
But this thing about Milan, I mean, I remember Luca Turin coming back from there, like in 2018 or whenever the last one was before the pandemic, saying that, like he had to leave because the smell was so, Norlimbanol was everywhere. And I mean, just, and none of the fragrances had concepts.
Yeah.
It was packaging. But the thing is, guys, that, so who's making those perfumes? It's not somebody like me that owns their brand.
No, it's
commercial perfumers that they go out and they write a brief and it goes to a fragrance house. A lot of it is, I think.
Most of the perfumes that runs into the niche market are made by perfumers that are in the main raw materials houses.
Right.
Firmenich, ESF.
So why are they passing off this crap? Why? I mean, this is what sets the consumer expectation of perfume.
Yeah.
What you give them.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Niche does not exist anymore.
I know.
Yeah. At least how we used to know it, like, the early, in the 2000s, it was very different.
It's
now
big money. It's big money. And I get it.
And the fact that now the big players, the big raw material players are into this new kind of market tells a lot of what this market becomes.
Yeah.
So if there is money, there is client that can pay this. And we are not talking about a lot of money. You just need to have the right contacts to go to Firmenich, Roberto, etc., etc.
But you do have to pay for the PR, though.
Yes, exactly.
That's part.
Yeah, but the biggest part is not making the perfume. This is
Right.
always it's making the packaging, okay,
Yeah.
and then all the marketing and PR thing. The perfume is the simplest thing to make.
Right.
Hmm.
Sadly.
Dave B, yes, Amber Extreme does fall into that family as well. I mean, each of them have slightly different profiles to them. Amber Extreme is a little bit more floral amber, but it is still very strong.
This is
Very strong stuff.
yeah.
It has like this, almost like this, like synthetic grape smell to it. Almost like it's almost like methyl and thranolate is in it or something. That one's really a tough.
Is more metallic than ambrosinite.
Yeah. And that's what free bottles to influences is for. Well, that's
Right.
There is that reliance on sort of the they're becoming the brand representatives, the brand ambassadors, and they're telling people, I love this. This is the it stuff right now. You're gonna get, it's like I said earlier, you're gonna get the compliments. It's gonna last a long time. You don't have to worry about, it'll still be on your body 2 days later after you've taken a hot shower. And this becomes part of the expectation. Exactly. And, the power of suggestion, it all kind of rolls into it. And this is what I see. And I don't want to be kind of like that cynical, like, get off of my lawn. This is not the way perfumery used to be, the way I knew it even 5 years ago. But it's really ramped up.
Yeah.
And and I heard so many stories about like Essence and the lack of focus. It's just more sort of like a means to an end. It's like the culture of not functional fragrance. Well, it's a lot. Some of it smells like it, but the culture of results driven fragrance. This will get you results. It's sort of they spoke. We're going to listen, and then we're going to give them what they want, and it's just going to. I don't know. It's obviously it's a source of frustration, but where do we come in? As independent perfumers and those who are still that are not going to give into that, how do we fit into all this? How are we heard above the din of all of this? That's the big question.
I mean, you have to keep saying what we're saying.
Yeah.
Where it goes, I don't know. But
because go ahead.
One interesting thing for me too is the prices of the bottles. We are talking about mainly bottles 50 or 100 milliliters that ranges between, let's say in dollars, $150 to $250. And my question is, where do people get all that money? Because if we look at 10 years ago, the prices was 100 euro or dollars, 120. Now the prices are doubled, and maybe this is why they want long-lasting perfumes, because they just want to pay once and then use it for a year long.
Maybe, but I mean, the reality is there's $1 of juice in there. I mean, that's what's also so insulting is the prices. I mean, it's the old model. It's still the same model that's always been there. You put the least amount of money in the juice, and the big piece of it is the bottles and the marketing and the fairs and the blah, 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 blah. Vogue magazine with the strips. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's right. And that's the distribution model that kills everything, because you have to have these high prices because half of that price goes right to the distributor, more than half of that. And what it remains to you after the taxes is very minimum.
So I think the only hope is keep trying to educate the consumer and keep trying to educate these fragrance writers. I mean, in the big magazines, but you know, they're all being invited and being given the sample bottles, and they expect stuff to smell the way that the consumer does.
Yeah. Rachel was just so aghast. She just had to you know, take a time out for herself. She disappeared, if you haven't noticed, and I think it might have been something technical, or she had to attend to something. But hopefully, we have her back pretty soon. We will be wrapping up pretty soon, anyhow, because we usually run about 2 to 2.5 hours. But hopefully, we'll at least have her come back, you know, before we close for the evening. Or whatever time of day, depending upon where you are on the globe tuned in here. But I see, like Fernando's point as well, you know, I do not necessarily evaluate a perfume solely in terms of performance. However, if I can put myself in the shoes of people who are always looking for longevity in perfumery and get to understand it. And that's true. I mean, you even look back in the 70s, and a lot of fragrances in the 70s, like Anjali, you know, the 24-hour perfume, you know. I can bring home the bacon, you know, fried up in a pan. And, you know, that was like I think that was like an 8-hour perfume, actually. Nowadays it is 24 hours, but you know, but that's the thing. It doesn't need to last that long, because some of them actually do. Some of them actually, because they have such heavy, high impact materials in them. There is nothing worse to me than to launder my clothes and to have them remain, like, after a good laundering, have them remain embedded in the clothes. Like,
well, what's interesting about this, but don't you think this? I think some of this crap around aroma chemicals and the need for huge sillage, which used to be the whole thing. Well, you know, I want to walk into the room and trail. Well, then everybody was coughing in the elevators, and you couldn't come to work with your perfume. So now it's that it has to last forever, whatever. But that. I think this has pushed this thing of, well, we don't like perfume. We want natural materials, because perfume is all like that stinky stuff that makes me feel like I have, you know, pitchforks in my head, because it's so obnoxious.
That in a way it is sort of like with this wave of these very tenacious and strong bases, that's adding to a backlash that already exists because of the whole greenwashing and clean living and like natural is better movement, that it's sort of endangering perfume as we know it.
I think it is. Some people love it, but then there's other people that are reacting against it and think if they just were all naturals, they won't smell like that. Well, they probably won't, but
right.
It certainly won't last as long.
Certainly, they don't have to worry. Yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
Thank God.
Unless you're just wearing like pure patchouli or vetiver or, you know, labdanum or just like. But then you don't get the compliments because people have to go really close to smell you.
Exactly.
It's
or you sit on your lap.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you got to get the person to sit on your lap, and then they'll smell you. They can't be several feet away. They can't be several yards away and say, "Oh, what is that?" Well, that's the thing I love about certain perfumes, is this sort of like a lean-in quality. It's like you really get to know somebody's fragrance because you're getting to know that person. You feel comfortable around that person, and then you pick it up. I mean, of course, I do love some of the bombastic classic fragrances, you know, the big heady 80s fragrances and stuff. But there is something to be said for that as well. But I just think in this age of externalizing, because we're very much an image obsessed culture now, you know, our lives are being portrayed and we're creating, you know, narratives of our lives online, that it's just sort of part of it. It's part of like, you know, getting the attention. So it's no wonder why it's such a huge part of it now that people notice you. I want to feel noticed.
To stand out.
Roberto.
People want to be recognized.
Yes.
Want to be recognized at kilometer, miles away. People want to say, "Oh, it's Roberto is arriving," but maybe just a minute. And I don't know if this is connected to the fact, let's say again, to the fact that we experienced COVID, so we had to stay far away each other, and now we need to, you know, to rebuild this ego.
Yeah.
Because it's about ego right now.
Yeah.
And there was somebody that's saying that after this pandemic, people will be more nicer. No, people are not nicer.
It's going to take some time, and I don't want, like, I do have a tendency to get pretty, cynical, and I don't want to do that because I don't think, that's something I grapple with, obviously, but. But I'd like to think that this is we're just trying to iron this out. The pandemic has made a psychological impact on pretty much everyone who's experienced it. And that's pretty much globally, everywhere. And we're trying to recover from that. And maybe that's why things are a little, as the kids say, wonky, a little off kilter. And hopefully we'll see that things sort of settle somewhere where it's a little bit more balanced, and people are treating each other with a little bit more respect again, and people are not driving like maniacs and pushing people around in stores and stuff like that. Will start, and maybe it will reflect also in the way that we use social media, but who's to say?
Well, maybe those 2 years, a lot of these brands were in the making and had to stall for their launches, and now, I mean, maybe that's why it seems like there's so much, like the market's so saturated.
The saturation, yeah.
Maybe they lost a couple years, and
yeah,
I don't know.
Playing catch up, yeah. GMG actually did have a question for the two of you. Which are the main materials both of you use to build your leather accords?
That's easy.
Yeah.
Well, for me, Labdanum Styrex isobutylquinoline. That is the famous aroma chemical.
Yeah.
But there is one that resembles just by himself. It's the pyrogenated Styrex. Pyrogenated Styrex is, you smell it and you smell leather. Okay.
Wow.
No way.
And Roberto, very quickly, for those who are not familiar with the pyrogenation process,
it's technically called destructive distillation.
Destructive distillation. Yeah, that's what I recall from my studies. I recall destructive distillation, and there's a few of them. There's some.
Once you get the resin, because usually you have frankincense pyrogenated, myrrh, styrax, all the resin, you can have a pyrogenated raw material. So you have the directly the inside, the resin, you put it in this distillator, you put fire, let's say you warm it up, and little by little all the lighter parts, and the middle parts will distill, and all the tar will be, will remain at the end of the distillation. Okay.
Well, I think that hydrocarbo resin, I think that's destructive distillation. Amber rome, yeah. Those I love the way both of those
great
smell.
Materials.
They are. I'm in love with. I would just wear them on their own as perfumes, honestly. Yeah. Diane, for you, for leathers.
I mean, along with what Roberto said, I put some safraline and safranel in my gardener's glove because you don't think saffron smells like leather, but actually when it gets in there with those things, it's really a really nice combination. It's
kind of like the top notes of the leather. Yeah. They're kind of like
suede-y elements.
Yeah, totally. And I missed this from earlier. I hope PS is still tuned in because I want his question to be answered. This is for both of you. I'm going to just show it. Why is it going back and forth? This is from PS. Same question for both of you. If you could have created a perfume already existing, which would it be? I know. That's a good one, right?
Wow. They're different.
Yeah.
Féminité du Bois de Serge Lutens.
I'd say Bandy.
Oh, those are two incredible choices, actually. Speaking of IBQ, oh, holy Moses. Love Bandi, Je m'ensayais, such
I'd
such
like
a
to make all of her things. So
incredible figure in the history of
Yeah.
perfume. I love her, her whole story, her huge influence on perfumers, and I mean, Féminité Droit. I mean, that's like that's in like the pantheon, like the Shiseido version of it. I hate to be that type, like the old version was better, but the Shiseido is really something else.
Yeah.
Féminité Droit.
But when we talk about these perfumes, I mean, we could go on and on. It's so humbling to do, in some ways to do the work we do, because so many gorgeous perfumes that have been created. Like Roberto was saying, well, like, how do you do something new? But, they're all a little different, but still.
But about Bandit, I wonder if now that kind of perfume will be worn by a woman. I don't think so.
Yeah, today. I think that the average consumer, first of all, will be like, "Wow, this smells like old people," the usual thing, and then second, they'd be like, "This smells like an old man," because they don't really have that reference point. A lot of young people today weren't even around the elders who were wearing it, because the elders have aged and they're not wearing Bandi. But there are some that are really inspired by it. I think, like Le Sillage Blanc from Ducita. Pissarra, the perfumer, sort of a nod to Bandi, but it's a very modern, very polite version of it. The IBQ is dialed down, but it's there.
But that's so interesting, I think, about her work. I think Brooke said this when she was on, that her work can be seen in the context of the times when she made it. Fracas, the very feminine woman. You have Bandi, you have, Jolie Madame. I know sometimes you don't know what the context you're creating is until, later on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was after the war, and I mean, and like Roberto was saying, or what we were talking about with the pandemic, maybe there's, who knows what that spawned, and if you get further ahead, you can't look back, but I don't know if any women would wear that now. I don't know.
I don't think a woman, like a mainstream woman, would generally wear that, because it would be so far removed. And I'm thinking in terms like, I'll be 45 in October. So I'm not a spring chicken. I'm young, but I'm not a spring chicken. I think of people, the average like perfume buyer, under the age of 30, somebody's consuming perfume, would smell it, and there would be things that they would expect that are not there, and things that are there that they didn't expect and they don't want. Like, I think that a lot of young people, because what is popular right now happens to be things that are very sheer and nothing spiky at all. No, leather is very polite. A lot of these, even like if something is a so-called chypre, it's like chypre light,
right,
or amber light. And also it has to be, there has to be a certain amount of sweetness and vanilla and some maltol. I think people have come to expect. I know it's funny, but it's true. But that is what is expected. So even some recent releases from so-called niche houses, I'm not even talking about designer houses. I'm not talking about what's being released by Givenchy or God knows what else, Paco Rabanne. But like, even like in some niche houses, they will release something with a concept, and I'll be like, that sounds really cool. I mean, like they're going to release sort of like this, an amber scent that has whatever in the notes breakdown, but then when I smell it, it's buried by this. It's always buried by this. It's always sort of like, is it really jasmine, or is it just like a puff of jasmine over the sweet ambery coumarin dry down and the woody ambers? Like it's almost like everything else about perfume is being sort of squeezed out. It's almost like it becomes sort of secondary. It's there just for, I guess, credibility to be still like, yeah. Roberto, what were you going to say?
Don't forget the tropical fruits.
I know.
Everything is fruity, or is woody amber, or is fruity.
Right.
Yeah. I like to kind of, my appreciation for tropical fruit kind of fell off with like Castorel Eden. Like from that point onward, like that was where it was still kind of cool because it was a little bizarre. But then, I'm thinking of like Prescriptive's Calyx and like Diorella. But we're not talking about that because at least those fragrances, they were still like mossy and woody.
They had the skeleton of real perfume.
Yeah. It wasn't Jolly Rancher version. It was like actual like over-ripened fruit, almost to the point where it's like, should we eat this fruit still? But it still smelled amazing. To like today, like the Disney fruits. Like it's like I like calling it like Disney wood. Some of my reviews, I'm like, this is a Disney woods.
Don't forget the gourmand.
Well, of course, we'd be remiss.
Gourmand, amber woody, these are the trends. And it's difficult to find originality now. To go back to Bundy, okay, who is going to wear that greenness? But that's original. That's really and was original for that time. Yeah. But as you said, now people do not expect anymore that kind of olfactive profiles.
Yeah. It's
well, I mean, there is Eris perfume. I mean, Jean Lee is making creative things for a niche. She is independent brand, and they're. I mean, I love them, but I think for the people we're talking about, they're probably extremely challenging.
Yeah. Oh, of course, to the mainstream consumer. Right. If they were to smell a lot of those, they wouldn't really know how to wrap their heads around it, and
right.
I mean, try to get them to tolerate Mabette, which I think is brilliant. But Mabette,
I like MXXX. Really dirty, but
dirty.
But again, it's just this segmentation of the marketplace.
Yeah.
We have with a lot of consumer items.
Margie Noir. I love her nickname. The take on Magie Noir. L'Enco Magie Noir. Panel and chat. Is it fair to say that many men's designers tend to smell too sweet and somehow blue to me? What could that be? And I like it that she uses the word blue because of the blue trend in a lot of men's fragrances. So she wants to know, like, what's creating all this sweetness? Roberto, what do you think is responsible?
Yeah, the sweetness usually talking about gourmand. Okay. Now the tendency is to use maltol, ethyl maltol, okay? Yeah. And that gives that sweetness that it's more than vanillin or ethyl vanillin. And that's why the trend, it's a male gourmand. It's going to be a male gourmand that it's sustained by the amber woods.
Yeah.
The world is becoming too sweet, okay,
and too bitter.
I know. I would like the bitterness to get out of society and back into the fragrances. I liked when the bitterness was in the fragrances. It's kind of like,
for example, talking about bitterness. Now there is a trend with cocoa, cocoa with chocolate.
Yeah. Right. It's in everything. Coffee is also.
The trend is still gourmand, but it is always a sweet gourmand because people like things that are sweet. No way. So more is sweet, okay, and more persistent is and more is good.
Smell like a walking cupcake all day.
And some people, well, that's a lot of influencers. That's sort of the tagline, like smell like a snack. It's my favorite. Smell like a snack.
Please.
Smell like somebody wants to eat you right up, and it's so like unnecessary. Like, so unnecessary. But this is how it is, and I don't know if the arc, where we are in the arc of that. I mean, there are some releases that are toying with the idea of adding some green and earthy notes back into fragrance, but not quite. Like Hermes H24, even though I find it to be a relatively tepid kind of fragrance, it's pleasant, but at least it isn't like a gourmand or a very heavy coumarin vanillic kind of fragrance. But then again, it's Hermes too, and Hermes isn't really known for doing that. So, and Chanel, Chanel had Bleu de Chanel, and Bleu de Chanel is, to me, just like sort of like a more refined Sauvage, Dior Sauvage. But yeah, these are the fragrances that are reflecting the zeitgeist. So let's just look at it that way.
They have their own perfumers though too. So, I always expect more from them.
Yeah, no,
that's not right.
But to expect more for them would mean having to pay the premium.
Will be a little innovative and interesting.
You have to pay for the exclusive line, so that is far out of reach from the average consumer.
That's true.
And speaking as somebody who has collected a few of them and have them in my collection, and I know that I'm not the intended income bracket for it, they're very, very costly. So it's for designers, like those exclusive lines are really not meant for the average consumer at all.
Right.
Which in a way, you could open up a whole discussion and we could really digress, and we're already 2 hours and 30 minutes in, of the class stratification and how that's reflected in fragrance. Right. Because there used to be a time, much like there was much more of a middle class, you could get quality fragrances, composed by Ernest Beau, like Evening in Paris, at a Woolworths. But something that probably had a budget and materials and development and everything for it to sustain for as long as it did. Even it got discontinued in 1969 and got re-released in the 90s. But even for something like this, it's like, you can't, that's just not really a thing now. You can't go into a discount department store and find a fragrance that probably has that same level of quality. It's like now I'm gonna digress and go into quality too. Like, what the hell does quality mean? But you know what I mean, though. It's like there's
a class structure around perfume, and the snobby people are not going to go into a Kinney drug and get their perfume.
Right. Unless they want to get a bottle of Taboo or something, and I don't know. It's which I have a lot of respect for Taboo, but it's just funny to think that this is it's such a reflection. It's such a reflection on the way that income has shifted, where and how the whole perfume industry has just followed suit. It's something to think about. But I think this. This is what I actually wanted to mention about. I wanted to mention about the types of gourmands that I appreciate. And yes, P.S. I do like Luten's style of dried fruits mixed with savory herbs. A good classic tonka. Tonka, I believe he meant, especially when impersonating tobacco. That's the kind of gourmand that I appreciate. The gourmand where it's always like this certain. There is a certain non-gourmand quality that is contrasting, where it doesn't smell 100% edible. Like there's still sort of like a reminder that this is a perfume. Do not drink, do not imbibe, do not eat. That I find fascinating, that kind of contrast. So I do like gourmands to a degree, but not something that's literal. Like literally, like I've smelled people that smell like a bakery. Or pastry.
Or you have to offset it, right? So this thing I'm working on with this woman, in the country. She had raspberry bushes. You know, she had fruits, which I'm going to put in there, but I'm also going to put beeswax in. I mean, she had bees, which, you know, it is not really what I would call sweet in the context of what we're talking about
Right.
here. It's more animalic and
Yeah.
but it's also, you know, it's very grounding sort of sweet. It's not like honey, which is sweet.
Yes, but to me, honey is the kind of sweet that always has that little that has that edge. It's
Yeah, it
kind of
has
like
polleny,
yeah,
you know.
even like a little animalic, a little dirty, like a little dirty
yeah.
back note to it, which is why it was so great when it was used back in the 70s and the 80s with, you know, Givenchy Gentlemen and Boss for Men, and there was one from Paco Rabanne, La Nuit de Paco Rabanne, this like very sultry sheep, and was so honeyed. Wonderful use of honey in those fragrances. Arabi from Serge Lutens is also wonderful. Ambo Satan. I would bet that there's a tiny bit of maybe something similar to Ambrosinite even in Ambo Satan, but that was at a time where it wasn't being overdosed. It was just sort of like just a bit of it to kind of flesh it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Panel's thoughts on cashmere.
Wow.
Have you ever used it?
Yes, of course, and it's for me, it's a little bit underrated because cashmere. Okay, when cashmere was started to be sold, it was the main thing was okay. It smells like cashmere, you know, like
like a cashmere. I always think of it as like a comfy muffler or scarf or something like that.
Yes, that's right. It has this smell that was not so harsh, not so pungent, but was smooth. And I used to use it, you know, together with Cedron Bear, you know, to make some different amber twist. Okay. And now again, but this is something because you have to learn how to use it. You can have beautiful cashmere accords that last longer. You do not need to just work with the strong ambers, but it's easy to use it's easy to use and it's easy and faster to use the ambrosinite instead of trying to think how to work out other amber molecules.
Yeah, I haven't used it except for this musk perfume that I'm doing right now, and I mean, I don't have any problems with it. I took it out because it was to me it's very spicy. I mean, you know, it's that's what I get from it. That's what
it does have that pinchy kind of feel to it. Yeah, they almost like they call it the trigeminal nerve.
Oh, I know. Yes, I know what you're saying.
It's
not that bad to me, but it I don't know. It just has a tone in the context of which I was using it that I didn't like.
It really wasn't fitting in with it. Fernando, I'm still thinking in what Roberto said. Niche does not exist anymore, but I want to believe that niche perfumery still exists within the indie realm, and that's why we are here listening to Diane St. Clair and Roberto. Have you been called Clair accidentally? Like, hi, Clair. And JG.
I always separate niche from, you know, artisan, because the niche to me has been gone, you know,
to me, you know, if you wanted to use niche as the dictionary definition, the niche would be any fragrance that is not, you know, mainstream. But the way that we label niche in perfume, I think you're absolutely right. What it used to be and what marketing is calling niche, it's very different now. It's like basically very mainstream fragrances that are gussied up and made more expensive and more appealing, you know, like eye candy, like, and Fernando continues, and JJ and other perfumers like Darren Allen, as long as spaces like this still exist to become a platform to get to know new indie brands, the niche will still keep existing. And that's exactly why I have this forum. And, you know, I do think that it is important to showcase the great talents, the great brands, the perfumers, and the writers and the critics and the people in the community who do have a genuine, authentic appreciation for perfume, that it isn't some sort of like flash in the pan kind of thing to see if you're going to be a big influencer, but really you're in it for the love of it. And Margie says, I tend to like a tiny bit of cashmere, not too much, but just a touch. And I think that's probably where it works best. I don't know. And I don't even think you could really overdose it at this point, because as far as I knew, they even restricted cashmere too. They've reduced the percentages in recent years. So I'm going to start. So stick around, the two of you. There's a backstage. We'll talk for a little bit. I know it's getting very late for you, Roberto, but we'll talk for a little bit backstage. And that just means that we're not going to be live any longer. And I'm just going to start to get the theme music out and chat with the audience here a little bit. So just bear with me. And because I am the host and the producer here, I need to get that lovely theme music going. So just bear with me as I try to scroll down to it. See, I'm breaking the fourth wall. This is what's happening behind the scenes. And here is our lovely theme music. So this includes the penultimate episode of Effluvium. We have just one more episode left. It is the 38th episode. And that will be a big extravaganza with a huge panel of 6 or 7 people. We're going to have Robes 08. That is going to be next Tuesday at 6 p.m. And then I'm going to be doing a first impressions stream the following Thursday, June 1st. And then I'm on break. I'm going to be on break for a while because I need it. It's been 38 weeks straight of doing these lovely streams. And it is a labor of love, but I have learned so much, and I've met so many incredible people. And most importantly, I appreciate the support and the enthusiasm from all of you who have been here for many of these streams. It does not go unnoticed, and I extend my love and appreciation to all of you. So thank you so much. So after the hiatus in June, well, I really wouldn't call it a hiatus. It's not that long. After my break, we're going to do a summer session on June 27th with Persules. So be on the lookout for that. We'll have Persules as our special guest. He'll be joining Rachel and I. And then I'm going to do a couple more summer sessions, one in July, one in August. We'll do a couple of other streams here and there. But my summers are going to be vacation time for the most part. So tune in next Tuesday for that finale with Robes 08. We're going to have Margie as well. We'll have Rachel. Ryan, the Perfume Bonfire, is going to be coming back. Alex, Perfume Temple, and more. And in the meantime, hi, Roberto. There's the back of Roberto. Sorry. You're reaching. Okay. So, so this has been a fantastic stream. Thank you so much, Manginosis. Until next time, be well. And thank you so much, guests. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers. All right. Ending broadcast in 1, 2, 3.